we're going to do a bit of a brainstorming session, which is going to set up your assignment for the next week. So we're talking about utopias, and what we have discovered so far is that utopias are based on some sort of values or rights that we feel everyone should have. So for example, in Harrison Bergeron, it was equality. And the other way that we can go about trying to create a utopia is by looking at problems that we see in present day society that should be solved. And so we're going to look at a combination of these kind of two approaches, where we're going to pick out some problems to be solved and pick out some values or rights that we want to emphasize or push. And what you guys are going to be doing is creating your own unique sort of utopian systems based on whatever you are going to choose as the most important problems to solve or values to promote. So I think that perhaps it's easier to start with the problems than it is with values. So what we're going to think about now, and this is going to come from you guys and not from me, is what's wrong with the world right now. So, what's that? COVID. Sure, yeah. Yeah, well, we can put it in more general terms than just COVID and say pandemic, but thank you for pointing out the obvious one, that we could get that out of the way first. So we can choose that as one of our, okay, do we know how to kind of solve that? Yeah, well, we think we do. So if you push that to its logical conclusion, what's that going to look like in a society? And I bet, well, probably somebody is doing this right now. Hopefully somebody who's a good writer is doing this right now. But I bet that there are good stories to be told in there by sort of following that. Okay, what could the solution to pandemic be? What would that look like? And can I tell a story in that world? And the answer is probably, yeah, for sure you can. And I'm sure that there are good stories to be told there. What else is a problem in the world? What else do you wish was better, Jim Jam?
Like no racism, like not just racism, but like anything. Well, how do you say this?
I think what you're saying is discrimination, yes. So racism, but not just racism. I thought that's where you were going. So yeah, how can we solve that? Well, in The Giver, if you saw that movie or read the book, they solve that by having everyone kind of look the same. And in fact, people are actually colorblind, so that they can't discriminate based on the color of people's skin because they can't tell people apart. And it's considered rude in that society to draw attention to any way in which anyone is different from anyone else. They wear the same clothes and everything like that. So what else is a problem that we could solve, Logger? Poverty. Thanks, not Logan.
What about lack of water?
Yeah, it could be included in poverty to say that some people have a lack of water, but not necessarily. We could say well, I'm going to put this in more general terms than just water. Resource scarcity, right? The idea that there isn't enough. So regardless of poverty, there might not be enough water to go around, or there might not be enough petroleum to go around, or there might not be enough food to go around. And so most utopian visions start with smaller groups of people. So either the planet's population has been reduced, or the population of your specific area has kind of been reduced. So this is a problem that we can think about ways to solve. Yeah, for sure. Government systems. Now, we can't really say government is a problem to be solved, but what is, let's see. Can we say democracy is a problem to be solved? Maybe. But, importantly, we can also say that democracy could be a value of our society. Now, before I put Courtney on the spot, she's got a moment to think of something to say here, I want to expand on this a little bit. So, one of the first people to write about utopia, to sort of try to imagine, okay, what we've got kind of sucks here in some ways, how could it be better? And one of the first people to do that was the ancient Greek writer, philosopher Plato. So Plato wrote from Athens. You know what Athens is, Jim Jam?
Isn't it like old Greek gods or something? Like those guys that like fought with spears?
It's the world's first democracy. So nothing to do with Greek gods, but a city in Greece where they had the first sort of democratic system. Now, of course, it's not. In some ways, it was more democratic than the system that we have. And in some ways, it was less democratic. So what I mean by the ways that it was more democratic is that the citizens, the people who lived there, couldn't only vote on who they wanted to represent them. They could vote on literally everything. So they didn't vote on Ted Falk to go and vote for them, or Themistocles to go and vote for them. They went down to the government house and voted for themselves about whether or not they should declare war on Sparta or whoever, or raise taxes, or build ships, or whatever other decisions their government was making. So what had happened was Athens had a history of having some sort of tyrant kings who, as tyrants tend to be, were interested in themselves only. And so they got rid of them violently, as you might imagine, and decided we're going to have a democracy. We're going to have rule by the people. So Plato was writing from this first democracy. Now, the way that it was less democratic, I should mention, than ours is what you might expect, in that the Athenians owned slaves, at least the rich ones did, and slaves, of course, were not allowed to vote, and women also were not allowed to vote, so it was only the free sort of land-owning men. So in that way, less democratic than what we have. But in any case, what Plato noticed as the problem, and so it's often been said that democracy is the worst form of government except for all of the other ones. It's kind of a joke, but it's phrased in the form of a joke, but it's kind of a serious problem. So the problem, of course, is what you will no doubt have noticed is that it's great that everyone has a say, right? It's great that everyone can vote, everyone over 18, obviously. It's great that everyone can have their say, but the problem is that, as you have no doubt noticed, everyone's kind of an idiot. Right? Have you noticed this? Yeah. So Plato was frustrated by this because what happened in Athens was whoever showed up to the government house, and I'm simplifying here, but whoever showed up that day voted on whatever got proposed that day. And so basically, who could show up would be people who had free time. So that's obviously a problem already. But let's say that I'm a manufacturer of spears. That's what my business is. I make spears. Now, if Athens, where I live, was to declare war on Corinth or Thebes or some other city, Sparta, then that would be good for my business because I make spears. And so everyone's going to need a spear if we're going to war, and I could get rich. So I get all of my friends and all of my family together, and we all go down to the government offices one day, and because my supporters are everyone who showed up that day, we vote that we're going to declare war against Thebes or Corinth or whatever other place. And now, Courtney doesn't want to go to war with Corinth or Thebes or whatever, and because she has her business is, let's say it's a restaurant, and her restaurant business is going to suffer because all of the men are going to be away using my spears, trying to attack some other city. And so she gets all of her, and also, maybe she's got a brother that is going to have to buy one of my spears and go and fight the Corinthians, and there's a good chance that he gets killed, and she's not really keen on that. So she gets all of her family and friends together the next day and goes into the government house and repeals or undoes my declaration of war against Thebes. And so stuff like this literally happened all the time. And so Plato's problem, I don't know, whatever you kids these days do with your telephones, and now is not the time. So Plato was frustrated by the fact that, we had rule by the people, which is literally what democracy means, but the people were a bunch of idiots. And Plato thought, okay, well, what's the fix here? We can't go back to having kings because we kind of decided that kings are usually jerks. And history has actually shown this fairly well, even if you get a king who isn't a jerk and he becomes the king because he's good at what he does, or the emperor or whatever, the chances are that his children are going to be jerks because they're going to grow up being the most spoiled children in the entire world. And they're going to grow up knowing that they're going to be king or emperor or whatever one day, and it kind of turns them pretty consistently into terrible people. And so even if you get one king who is a pretty good guy and has everyone's best interests in mind and is wise and all of that, the chances are that his children are going to be jerks. So Plato came up with this complicated system whereby the philosophers would become the kings, and there would be no one would know who their parents were, and it's very complicated. But so he started thinking about democracy as being a problem to be solved. Now, if you want to put democracy here as a value, I don't want to use green again. If you want to put democracy here as a value, as something that, everyone having their say is something that's important to you, which it is to a lot of people, then the problem that needs to be solved over here would be ignorance. Right? So if you're going to have the decisions being made by the people, then it's important that the people aren't stupid. That kind of makes sense? So this is actually why we have a public school system and why democratic societies tend to put a high value on education. Because if we want our country to be better, then we need voters who aren't idiots. Count you out? Don't sell yourself short, Jim Jam. You got a lot to offer. Just check with me before you vote, okay?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
just kidding. All right. It's not illegal to tell someone who you voted for, no, but it is illegal to require somebody to tell you who they voted for. Okay, so what else can we think of as problems to be solved, Courtney? Now you've had some time to think about it. Yeah, crime, for sure. Now this can take lots of forms, right? Lots of different kinds of crime. There's violence, and there is, maybe we can add addiction. It's not exactly crime, but sort of related. All of those things, problems to be solved. Anything else come to mind for anybody as problems that we'd want to solve? And if we were trying to make a better world, what would we want to try to fix? Okay. Then let's go to values or rights. So if we, as we are, want to try to create a better society, what are we going to base it on? What's important to us? So maybe equality, maybe democracy, maybe some sort of freedoms, or maybe some sort of, I don't know, you guys tell me.
Freedom of speech.
Okay. Freedom of speech. What else comes to mind?
Right to peaceful protesting.
Yep. Right to peaceful protest. Acceptance, yeah, acceptance is a value for sure. And we can say it's related to equality, but it's not necessarily the same. Yeah, for sure. This is good so far. What else you guys got? What's important to you, Jim Jam? Rights, freedoms, values? What do you like?
I don't know what else fits into it. School should be optional.
Okay, so let's say freedom of choice.
Yeah.
That's important to you? Okay. What else?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, buddy.
Street racing should be legal.
Street racing should be legal. I'm not sure that that's exactly a value or a right.
It's one of my values.
I think that qualifies as more of a pastime or a, maybe if you want to stretch the definition, you could call it a sport, but hockey is not a value. Street racing is not a value. So your right to endanger the lives of others, I suppose, could fall under freedom of choice.
When you put it that way.
When I put it that way, it almost seems like your point was sort of juvenile and foolish. But I didn't mean that. That wasn't my intention. It just sort of came out that way.
Of course you-
Yeah. What else have you guys got? What else can you think of? Think about it in terms of maybe some of these things. What would almost be like, I'm not going to say the opposite, but sometimes the opposite. So if we look at violence, for example, is there a value or a right that we can promote that would be sort of the antithesis of violence, the antidote?
Not that, but for like values or rights. Like generosity or like empathy, like
Yeah, we can certainly value empathy and generosity. So what I was trying to suggest there was maybe something like safety, right? So the opposite of crime and violence would be right to personal safety or something like that. What else? We don't have anything here that would really address poverty or resource scarcity or ignorance. So we could say on this side that, I don't know, education is a value, or that sharing is a value. I suppose you could say equality might address poverty, but it depends on how you want to look at equality. What else?
there's something like I don't know if it's for resource scarcity, but like it's like they like protect like wildlands and stuff like that.
Yeah, the environment for sure. Just choosing a color here. Environmental I don't know, what do we want to say? Protection, responsibility,
Probably something.
protection, okay. So this is a pretty good list. You guys came up with a really good list of values and rights especially. We didn't even cover things like war and things like that. Yeah, pat yourselves on the back. Especially for the right to street racing. That was particularly good.
Another bug.
So I'm going to add things like war here. What I'm getting at, though, I'm going to like stop this discussion now. But what I'm getting at is that there are plenty more problems that you could think of, and plenty more values or rights that you could think of that could be used. And so, what your assignment is going to be, and I'll post it tomorrow. But your assignment is going to be to choose 2 problems that you think are important to try to solve, and choose 2 values or rights or freedoms that you think are important, and explain why on each of those. So I'll post that tomorrow. I'll post the video of this discussion as well. I think I already posted the video of Friday's discussion that was kind of similar to this. So you can consult with what the other class came up with as well. What you're going to eventually do with this, so for next week you're just kind of setting your priorities, but it's the first step towards creating your own good place, your own perfect world. And what I've found is that if we don't start out with these targets at first, then all of our utopias tend to be about our pet hobbies, Jim Jam. So, your utopia would be all about street racing or whatever. And so that kind of gets us off track. But if we start with these kind of targets, then you can work in your pet projects and pet peeves, I suppose.